Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. This time around, our profile is not about a selected individual, although we will speak with a selected individual. It is about an event, a very important event, and an event that seeks to create a greater understanding of the impact that peace journalism can have on the outlook that people have about our world and our nation. Human rights, the foundation of peacebuilding, is the theme for the 2019 Greater Kansas City Peacebuilding Conference. It'll be at Avila University on Thursday, on Friday at Park University, and on Saturday at Johnson County Community College. Admission to the conference, which is open to the public, is free, but registration is required and encouraged. And there's a luncheon on Saturday, so there are reasons they want you to register for it. But it creates a fantastic opportunity to learn about a movement that seeks to highlight the peace side of conflict and not necessarily the war side of it. Our conversation today is with Steve Youngblood. He is the director of the Center for Global Peace Journalism and a communications professor at Park University. He has traveled all over the world to encourage journalists to take a different look at the way that they cover conflict. Our conversation with Steve is enlightening and enriching, and it comes your way next, right here on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. We're here with Joe Spiker, the president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you worked for other companies in the construction industry. What inspired you to start your own company in Easton Roofing?
Well, you know, Danny, when you are working for somebody else, you oftentimes don't get to see the project through from beginning to end, and you don't get the final control over the customer experience. And I wanted to build a place where people can come and get work done on their house and not have to worry about being treated the wrong way and get a good customer service experience start to finish.
The company slogan is "Where Integrity Matters." Why is that so particularly important to you?
Well, for us, what that means is treating each other with respect at work, treating our clients with respect, and making the right choice, especially when no one's looking. So when you're presented all the time as a contractor with choices that have to be made, are you going to make more money on this if you cut a corner? And we just wanted to make a place and a slogan that said to our people and to whoever is our customer, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the right choice regardless of profit.
Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. Are you thinking of starting a new business? Does your current business feel stuck? Or are you just trying to grow what you already have? Running a business is a lot of work, and it takes the right team to make it all happen. If you're looking to grow your business, call my friends Ben and Greg over at Fuego Consulting. They put together a company that can help you reach your business goals. Whether you're looking to get online, build a social media strategy, or rebrand your business, they can help. Call Fuego at 816-663-9695 or visit them online at fuegoconsulting.com. Fuego Consulting. Let's grow your business together. I was duped, and I recommend you be next. For better or worse, the ultra-realistic impression of me sits now in my wife's office to spook her on a daily basis. So what is Doob? D-O-O-B. It's the keepsake of a lifetime, a 3D-generated, incredibly lifelike figurine. 66 cameras take an image at exactly the same moment in any pose, and state-of-the-art 3D technology transforms that into exact replicas of you, anyone you know or love, a pet, whomever is close to your heart. Create lifetime memories with a Doob. Visit their Facebook page at Doob 3D Kansas City, or better yet, see their incredible creations. Visit their location down on the plaza in the heart of it at 231 West 47th Street in KC Mo. Doob, be next.
There's no need to get a case of the Mondays every week, not during football season anyway. Hey, this is Matt Llewellyn from the 23rd Street Brewery, and we are the place for Monday Night Football. Food and drink specials every week, and all new televisions always at 23rd Street Brewery. The hardest thing about Mondays now will be getting through the workday, although waking up on Tuesdays might be a little bit tough. But remember, watch all the Chiefs games, NFL games, every game at the 23rd Street Brewery.
Steve, this is the 7th year of what is really an admirable and thought-provoking type of weekend that people can have as Park University and two other Kansas City Higher education institutions co-host a conference that presents how peace builders around the world have positively impacted their communities by advocating for human rights. The title of it is Human Rights, the Foundation of Peace Building, and it's the theme for the 2019 Greater Kansas City Peacebuilding Conference. Park University, Avila University, and Johnson County Community College is well involved in this. How did this all start?
Let me also throw a plug in for the International Relations Council, which is one of our partners as well. So it started with a one-day conference. The first couple of years, the conference was held on a Saturday at Johnson County Community College. And then in the subsequent years, we added Park University and then later Avila University. So it started with a conference at JCCC that was entirely devoted to Uganda, to peace building in Uganda, to projects that involved nursing and healthcare in Uganda. And so the decision was made to expand it beyond that. And as you say, for the last 7 years or so, we've had a conference that deals with peace building and that concentrates year to year on various themes. This year, of course, it's human rights and peace building.
What is the cooperative aspect of the three universities, and what as a team does it add to it that maybe as one single entity you couldn't?
Well, we certainly have different perspectives on peace and peace building just because the institutions are so diverse. So you have the International Relations Council that's largely educational, looking to expand people's horizons. You have a Catholic university in Avila University with the sensibility that brings. You have a private institution in Park University and the Center for Global Peace Journalism, which I run here at Park University. And then you have a public two-year college, Johnson County Community College, that again brings their own unique perspective to this. And I think that the combination of these four entities has really been a tremendous strength for the conference, because I think that it's reflected in the kind of fascinating and diverse speakers and issues that we discuss.
How did the Center for Global Peace Journalism here evolve?
Well, the center began out of my work in promoting peace journalism, which I've been doing since about 1997. So I was doing it individually first, and then the center evolved. The center was launched in 2012. And so since that's happened, I've had the opportunity, the rare opportunity to visit 26 countries and work with journalists, work with professionals to work with students to promote this idea of peace journalism.
When you say the words peace journalism to someone or talk about world peace, as it were, is it sometimes too grand a thing for people to kind of grasp?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that I've noticed is how the word peace itself is inflammatory, that everyone brings their own language to this idea of peace. And in fact, peace journalism isn't about actively promoting peace, but instead it's about giving peacemakers a voice. It's about non-inflammatory reporting that doesn't put fuel on the fire, that doesn't exacerbate conflicts. In fact, I just got back a couple of days ago from Northern Ireland.
Right.
So I'm working with Northern Irish journalists, lecturing Northern Irish students in a discussion about the role of media in the post-Troubles Northern Ireland.
What is the level of interest, engagement, curiosity among young people for this type of journalism?
Well, as I rediscovered in Northern Ireland, there's a real generational divide here. So when I'm talking to old-timers like us, sorry, Danny.
It's all right.
When I'm talking to old-timers like us, there's a definite pushback, because the way that we were taught in journalism school is a little bit different than what peace journalism looks at. And in fact, I've found among students and among younger journalists a great receptivity to these ideas, to the idea that we as journalists have a responsibility to not incite or exacerbate conflict. Among older journalists, especially a colleague of mine in Northern Ireland, I just lectured in his class the other day, there's a little more pushback because I think of the traditional way that journalism has been done.
Is the feeling of that type of person who wants pushback is that this is a form of some kind of advocacy journalism?
That's exactly right. So the chief criticism of peace journalism is that it's advocacy journalism, it's an abandonment of objectivity, and simply none of the principles, the dogma that have been laid out regarding peace journalism state that's what peace journalism does. When I wrote my textbook about peace journalism, I talked to one of the originators of peace journalism. His name's Dr. Johann Galtung. He's in his 80s now. He's one of the originators, I say, of peace journalism. And I told him about the pushback that I get. And he said, think of it this way. When I say that someone is a war journalist, do we say, oh, he's advocating war? We wouldn't say that, right? Just because you're reporting about war and about conflict doesn't mean that you're an advocate. Well, the same can be said of peace journalism. Because we're reporting about peace, because we're giving peacemakers a voice, because we're not exacerbating conflict, it doesn't mean that we're advocating for a peace. We're merely leading discussions about peace.
Do you feel as if people would sometimes on the outside look at it as almost, dog bites man, man bites dog, that war is inherently news because it's an active thing, whereas peace journalism or peace you want a place where there's passivity in the end, and maybe that they don't feel like that's as quote-unquote newsy?
Well, I think another misperception about peace journalism is this idea that peace journalists sweep negative information under the rug, that we cover only good news. And in fact, when I talk to journalists about peace journalism, one of my messages is news is still news. And we still report the same stories that we reported before. So the question doesn't become, do we report this? The question is, how do we report it? So for example, I was in Cameroon about a year ago, and there's an ongoing civil war in Cameroon. And a journalist in one of the seminars asked me, Stephen, how would you cover this? He said a neighbor of mine was dragged out of her house in broad daylight and shot and killed by the police. He said, how can you cover that without making people angry? And we talked that over with my Cameroonian colleagues, and sometimes the best we can do, I think, is to not make that bad situation worse. So we have to report that incident. It's news. And if we don't report it, people are going to find out anyway, and probably find out incorrect or distorted information. So we have to report unpleasant news. The question is, how do we report it? And can we at least do it without the inflammatory language, without the framing that makes angry people angrier?
When people also hear about this topic, do they have a sense that you're trying the impossible, that there's so much conflict in the world now, or at least we hear about so much conflict, and there's, like you say, Cameroon, probably the 20th down the pecking order of notoriety as far as a war is concerned, but terrorizing a nation itself. Is there some thought that you're tilting at windmills a little bit?
Well, certainly, again, among the critics of peace journalism, they will say, well, peace journalism can't change the world. To which we reply, we never said that we could. For peace to take root, to last, there are 100 things that need to happen.
Right.
One of those things is more responsible journalism. One of those things is journalism that builds bridges and brings people together.
Is there, I guess, was the whole idea perhaps behind it that the stories of people who were trying to do things to propagate peace were being underreported?
That's exactly right. And if you, the textbook example, actually it's in my textbook,
right,
is the run-up to the Iraq War in 2003, where a number of academic studies have been done that showed that the voices heard on American television and British as well, that on television were by far disproportionately those in favor of war. So in the run-up to the Iraq War, we heard a lot from the warmongers, a lot from the crowd that tried to sell us weapons of mass destruction, a lot from the crowd that tried to at least imply that Saddam Hussein was somehow behind 9/11. We heard very little from very few dissenting voices, very few peace voices. So far from advocating peace, I think a peace journalist in this situation is merely advocating peace, good journalism. Let's balance this out. Let's have at least proportionate voices from those who advocate war and those who advocate peace.
The current world climate, how would you mentioned that peace journalism, as it were, although your program here or center here started in 2012, was about a 20-year, 2-decade-old type of thing. How has the world atmosphere changed in 2 decades?
Oh my goodness, you have 24 hours to respond to that question.
Is it a worse landscape, I guess, for trying to create more stories of peace?
Well, I mean, the biggest changes in media, as we know, are the collapse of the advertising-supported model for journalism, right? So you look at the consolidation of ownership, the collapse of local news and local newspapers and so on. So while that's happening, peace journalism is asking for better reporting, more contextual reporting, solutions reporting. And those things take time and take money. So, I mean, that certainly puts peace journalism, all journalism, in a difficult spot. I think another major change is disinformation. In fact, I'm working this afternoon on a presentation I'm going to give in a couple of weeks at the World Forum for Democracy in Strasbourg, France. And this presentation talks about how disinformation is a threat to democracy and how these peace journalism principles can be used, I believe, to combat disinformation.
We've seen a significant rise in nationalism. I mean, it's always been. I said a re-rise.
It's always been.
We've always seen waves of it, certainly, but a recent wave of it with here in the United States, Brexit, things like that, where people feel like that their country is somewhat being invaded by foreigners, basically, to boil it down to a ridiculously simple phrase. Is that another challenge in that regard for peace journalism?
Well, absolutely. I think it's a challenge for all journalism to help our readers and listeners sort through what they see on social media, to provide platforms where disparate groups can communicate, and even in an ideal situation, to provide programming that can build bridges. And as we know, disinformation seeks the opposite. It seeks to divide people. It seeks to leverage divisions that already exist within society, to preach hatred and to sow the seeds of instability.
When people are trying to be active in the areas of peace, and you're looking to report on it, how successful do you feel like people's efforts are being these days? I think people's perception would be that, well, people who are advocating for peace aren't having much luck here. Is there maybe more there than people would realize as far as successes are concerned by people who are advocating for peace?
Well, in fact, there's a lot more there. The International Day of Peace was September the 21st, and to celebrate that, I wrote an op-ed that appeared in the Kansas City Star about the literal mountain of peace-building work that's occurring in the Kansas City area, and in peace building across numerous domains. So academic peace building, like the kind exemplified by the Greater Kansas City Peacebuilding Conference, but all sorts of efforts. Peace building that brings in refugees, peace building that empowers women and youth, peace building organizations like the International Relations Council, the Jewish Vocational Services. The list goes on and on. So Kansas City is, I think, to to the surprise of some, a real hotbed for peace building and for peace building efforts.
Well, refugee issues in general are so controversial now, and as I said, these are all things that are cyclically through history have been issues. It's not like anything's new under the sun, but certainly right now in our nation, in many nations, the ideas of even people who are in incredibly awful situations have no desire to do anything but flee terrible circumstances, but that doesn't matter to some. What challenges are there also?
Well, rather than wade into the muck that is refugee and immigration policy, I'm a lot more concerned with the ways that immigration, migration, refugees are reported in the media. So, for example, I've done projects that seek to improve reporting about Syrian refugees. I've done those projects in Turkey, in Germany, and in Austria, all three places that house a number of refugees. Here in the U.S., when we talk about immigration, there have been a number of academic studies that have shown that the coverage of immigration is often one-sided, it's often superficial, it uses metaphors that dehumanize immigrants. How many times have you heard flood of immigrants, or we're inundated, or they're overrunning our border? I believe that they've been likened to an infestation of some sort. I believe the word infestation is even used. And so that kind of reporting doesn't serve anyone's interest, and certainly creates a lot of myths and misperceptions in the eyes of the public.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Looking for a truly unique escape from your normal entertainment or corporate team-building regimen? Stay tuned for an exclusive offer only for Reasonably Irreverent listeners. I'm excited to tell you about an extraordinary destination, the Exit Room, located in the heart of beautiful downtown Lee Summit. The Exit Room is a distinctive entertainment option that offers a cool alternative to the normal couples night out, family get-togethers, and corporate team-building events. The Exit Room is a one-of-a-kind boutique escape room catering to special occasions and corporate team-building events, and is unmatched in the Kansas City metro. With 5 individually designed and varied escape room adventures, your party or employees can unplug from their electronic world, interact with one another, match wits, and ultimately escape the humdrum of the ordinary. The Exit Room adventures cross decades and centuries and create fascinating fun. I know the owners well. They are local folks, their staff is warm and friendly, their lobby is inviting and beautiful, and their adventures are award-winning. Check online. There are over 1,000 reviews, and note that they are a rare 5-star ranked business. Visit their website and Facebook page, and any of my listeners who books online at theexitroomkc.com using the promo code ClinkScale19 gets 10% off any ticket purchase. The Exit Room in Lee Summit. Unplug, interact, and escape. Sumner One is the company to make your office maximize efficiency. Their family of companies make up one of the largest independent dealers of office technology in the Midwest. They are proud to bring the best service and technology to top companies across the region. Sumner One can help your organization run more smoothly than ever. Sumner One printers, copiers, MFPs, managed print services, document management, infrastructure design, IT services, disaster recovery, and business continuity. Welcome to the one place where everything works. For more information, call Carl Little at 913-225-56.
Before you spend your time and money going after an MBA, ask yourself why. Is it so you can tell people you got your MBA? So you can add a line to your CV? So you can call it a CV instead of a resume? Truth is, any MBA will do that. On the other hand, if your goal is to learn how to successfully manage and grow a business with real-world insights from experienced professionals, well, consider getting your MBA from Park University. Our low student-to-teacher ratio gives you personalized attention, and our face-to-face and online classes offered in 8-week terms are designed with working professionals like you in mind. No wonder the Kansas City Business Journal ranks Park University as the top MBA program in the area. Classes begin June 10th at all 4 KC area locations: Parkville, Downtown, Independence, and Lenexa. Visit park.edu to get started.
For many people, a family law case will be one of the most difficult experiences in their life. The law firm of Kenneth McRae will help you through it. Personal and effective help from Ken in concert with you will develop a unique strategy for your unique case. As Ken always says, divorce can be civil law, not civil war. Licensed in Kansas? Visit McCraeLawOffice.com or call 913-972-4765.
Steve Youngblood is our guest. He's the director for of the Center for Global Peace Journalism here at Park University, where we sit on a beautiful day today. And on the weekend next weekend, as we sit here, Thursday through Saturday, October 31st through Saturday, November 2nd, Avila University, the International
Relations Council.
Thank you. As well as Johnson County Community College and Park University are combining for Human Rights, the foundation of Peacebuilding. It's a 3-day event at all 3 locations doing different things. And tell us about each day and how people can really for free, and people should register for some of these things. There's a meal for one of them, but for in these particular settings, what do you have to offer people who really are looking for things to give them some hope, that really there is some possibilities of human rights and human rights making a major impact and not just skimming the surface?
Well, the events begin on Thursday at Avila University. There's a lunch, and then at noon, it will feature comments from Mr. Felix Manzi, who is a Rwandan peace activist. He's done some work through Avila University, and I think that should be a pretty fascinating presentation. Then on Friday, November the 1st, the event comes to Park University from 1 to 4 p.m. And so we're talking about human rights and journalism, and that journalism is in of itself one of the rights that's the right to information and so on is guaranteed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we'll be drilling down a little bit more specifically with Sarah Margon, who until recently was with Human Rights Watch. She's now the Foreign Policy Director of the Open Society Foundation, and she'll be making that connection between human rights and journalism. Then we're going to go local, and we have several journalists talking about human rights and journalism in the African American community, Louis Duguid and Betty Tate, and then Mary Sanchez, syndicated columnist, formerly of the Kansas City Star, will be joining us to talk about media and human rights regarding the Latino community. The final presenter of the day will appear via Skype, and that's a colleague of mine from Northern Ireland who will be talking about how human rights journalism has manifested itself there. So it should be a pretty fascinating afternoon, Friday the 1st at Park University from 1 to 4. Then the event concludes Saturday at Johnson County Community College between 9 and 1:30. So Sarah Margon, who I mentioned before, will be giving the keynote address regarding human rights and the rule of law. Then we'll have a panel discussion called Human Rights in Kansas City, The Struggle Continues. We have a really fascinating panel that includes Kansas City, Missouri School Superintendent Mark Bedell. We have Alvin Brooks from the Ad Hoc Group Against Crime. We have Tara, I'm going to pronounce her name wrong, but she's the director of the KC Tenants and the Kansas City Eviction Project. And so they'll all be talking about how human rights manifest themselves for average people here in Kansas City. And then the event will conclude with lunch. And as I say, that's on Saturday, November the 2nd at Johnson County Community College.
You mentioned that you've traveled so extensively in your time in doing this and talking about peace journalism. Do you think people in the United States have much of a feel for the lack of human rights in some nations or many nations outside the United States? There are issues that are going to be explored in this weekend of seminars about things in the United States that certainly need to be addressed, but maybe they just are pale in comparison to what we see around the world.
Well, I just think that many Americans don't know a lot about the world around us, and I think we can lay part of the blame on the media. So if you look at how much time is devoted to international news on nightly newscasts, you look at the resources devoted to the collection of international news. You asked me about journalism trends. That's another one. Over 20 or 30 years, international bureaus closing down around the world. So you have this dearth of international news, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that Americans have no idea where Cameroon is or that there's a crisis in Cameroon. So I do think that that it's important. One of the things that this Peacebuilding conference does is to bring that kind of awareness, both internationally and locally.
Well, human rights journalism around the world also is a pretty darn dangerous enterprise for people. I mean, people on a regular basis either are absconded, killed, whatever. There's a lot of what really would be great and heroic stories, some tragic, that can be told and probably aren't being told.
Well, I certainly agree with that. I mean, it's peace journalism and journalism writ more broadly both require not just freedom of the press, but freedom of or safety of journalists. And so I mentioned Cameroon before. A number of my Cameroonian colleagues have been kidnapped, have been threatened by either side in the Civil War. I was giving a seminar in Cameroon, and the gendarmes came and shut us down upon threat of arrest or perhaps worse. And so, it's not just Cameroon. You look at threats for journalists around the world, and you see them growing. You see the rhetoric against journalists, a lot of which is coming from the White House. You see that, in my view, fueling and empowering those who would abuse journalists worldwide. The impunity with which Jamal Khashoggi was murdered, I think is not just tragic, but I think it's going to have lasting consequences for journalism around the world. And if this is a topic, Danny, that interests you and others, the safety of journalists, there's a great resource called the Committee to Protect Journalists, and you can find that at cpj.org. And they keep track of all of these threats and transgressions against journalists worldwide.
You mentioned you've traveled to 26 countries, I believe was the figure that you used. Are there places that maybe if you went to cpj.org, they just say don't go?
Well, I will tell you the only place I've been invited that I haven't gone yet is Afghanistan. And so partially because my wife would kill me, but also partially because it's just not stable enough.
Right.
But there are places that I certainly wouldn't go. I'm working with a university in Ukraine, for example, to do a project there. But the place in Ukraine that I'm going is in far western Ukraine, where it's absolutely safe. It's very European. But there are parts of eastern Ukraine where there's still combat between Ukrainians and Russians that I wouldn't go anywhere near. But certainly there are an unfortunately large number of hotspots around the world where if journalists or journalism trainers like myself go, they would be taking their lives into their own hands.
Do you feel that the resources that aren't being expended on journalism, be it international bureaus, being it domestically in various countries, is part of why we see seemingly more conflicts? I always, when I talk about anything negative in our world, be it violence or murder or crime or international strife, I always point out that in some regards we just know more about it. But in some regards, it's also worse. In this regard, for these topics, maybe it's the pendulum. Maybe we hear less about these things, which is part of the thing that you're talking about. And is that fueling the problem?
Well, I mean, I think ignorance is always a factor that can contribute to conflict. On an interpersonal level, it's once you meet someone who you might have thought of as your enemy, and you break bread with them and you talk with them, you realize it's pretty hard to hate an individual. So it's a lot easier to hate a group of people with whom you're not acquainted, or with whom the only knowledge you have is through some sort of distorted media filter. So how many people in rural America have never met a Muslim?
Right.
And so all they know of Islam is what they see on television. So it's no wonder that there's this Islamophobia, that there's this fear.
Right. No question about that. I just wanted to get your sense of your own optimism. As, you talked about us being people of our generation, older, whatever. I mean, we don't have 100 years left on this planet. Where do you feel like endeavors like your own, or peace journalism in general, do have a chance of making inroads and helping?
I really do see some traction. In my book, I talk about a number of peace journalism projects, a number of universities where it's being taught, a number of programs from Uganda to the Philippines to Lebanon, here in the U.S., Mexico. There's a long list of countries and places where I think peace journalism is starting to gain traction. In the media, there's no publication I know of here in the U.S. or in Europe that labels themselves peace journalism, but the peace journalism is there if you look for it. A lot of the work and columns, for example, done by Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times, I would consider peace journalism. A lot of the work done by The Guardian, I would consider peace journalism. I think when Al Jazeera and the BBC go to Africa and report in Africa about in ways that American media don't seem to want to do, I think some of that, giving a voice to the voiceless, offering counter narratives, I think some of that is peace journalism too. So I'm a glass is half full guy, but certainly just as convincing a case could be made for the empty half of the glass.
There's so much importance, unfortunately, to slogans and what you either others tab your movement or you decide to call it that. There can, as you mentioned, just the word peace is controversial. You mentioned that at the outset. For instance, I think that it's my strong opinion that if people who are very much concerned with the environment, as they should be, had originally called their movement not global warming, but what it's more commonly called now, climate change, that they would have been in a much better place at this point in time. Is the word peace a dangerous one in tabbing what you do?
Well, first of all, you're certainly right about labels. I'm thinking of the most clever political label of our generation, which is the successful Republican effort to call the estate tax the death tax. Well, who could be against? Who could possibly be for taxing death? So, I think that's a stroke of brilliance, right? In terms of peace, and it's a discussion that I've had at length in Northern Ireland, actually. In terms of calling this peace journalism, for me, the principles are a lot more important than the label.
Right.
So when I was in Northern Ireland, I got some pushback against peace journalism. And I said, call it bangers and mash. I don't care what you call it. If you adhere to the principles and practice it, that's fine. There's sort of an offshoot of peace journalism that includes some of its principles called conflict-sensitive journalism. And I think that that's a lot more, that it's a milder version of what we're talking about, probably more palatable to some. But I push back a little against the conflict-sensitive journalism because I don't think it does enough of what it needs to do. But I can see where that's a more acceptable label for some.
And how excited are you to be in your seventh year of this event, and it's growing, and you obviously, if something grows, it's because it's working. must be gratifying for you.
It's wonderful to see the feedback that we get. It's really maybe one of the few chances during the year that those in the Kansas City Peacebuilding community, and there are a lot of us, those in the Kansas City Peacebuilding community can really get together to discuss these issues of importance, to share success stories. That was the theme of last year's Peacebuilding Conference, was the successes in peacebuilding. So to collaborate, to share our successes. So it's really exciting to see that those groups get together. And it's exciting as well to see students energized by the reality, the notion that they can make a difference in terms of peace.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Klingscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Klingscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.